Welcome, everyone, to our deep dive into Genesis. Chapter 1, the creation story. It's one of those texts that's so foundational to so many cultures and beliefs, but we're going to approach it with fresh eyes. See what kind of hidden gems we might uncover.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that Genesis is presented as a narrative, a story, not a scientific textbook.
Right.
So instead of trying to map it onto modern science,
Yeah.
let's try to understand the world through the lens of ancient Hebrew thought.
Okay, so let's unpack this creation story. We've got these 6 days of creation, each with a pretty deliberate pairing. Light and dark sky and water, land and plants, sun, moon, and stars.
Right. And then it moves on to sea creatures and birds,
Yeah.
followed by land animals,
Yeah.
and finally humans. It's fascinating how there's this beautiful escalation, this increasing complexity with each day culminating in humanity. It really highlights the idea that creation wasn't random, but rather a deliberate and purposeful process.
And I love how after each stage of creation, there's this refrain, God saw that it was good. There's this sense of intentionality, purpose, and appreciation for everything that's being brought into existence. What's fascinating to me is how it all builds up to this climax. Humans made in the image of God. Now, we know this isn't about physical appearance.
Exactly. It's something much deeper. Scholars have been debating this concept for centuries. But it points to something unique about human nature, something that sets us apart from the rest of creation. It speaks to our inherent dignity, value, and purpose.
I'm curious about this. You're saying that this idea of being made in God's image was a pretty radical idea back then.
Absolutely. In many ancient cultures, humans were seen as playthings of the gods, or even just insignificant beings in the grand scheme of things. But Genesis presents a different view. Here, humans are front and center, created with intention and given a special role in creation.
So how does that idea, this concept of being made in the image of something greater, how does that resonate with you? Does it change how you see yourself and the people around you?
It's a powerful concept to contemplate. It challenges us to see the inherent worth in every human being, to treat each other with respect and dignity, regardless of our differences.
I totally agree. It's like it's laying the groundwork for a more compassionate and just world. Okay, so we've got this epic creation story unfolding, but then something really interesting happens on the seventh day.
Well, yes, the seventh day, God rests. Now, this isn't just about taking a nap.
Right.
This is about the establishment of the Sabbath, a concept that goes far beyond just a day off.
So it's more than just catching up on sleep. What's the deeper significance here?
It's about intentionally stepping away from the constant drive to produce, achieve, and conquer. The Sabbath is a time set aside for reflection, for gratitude, for reconnecting with the divine, with yourself, and with the world around you.
That's a pretty radical idea. Even today, we live in a world that's obsessed with productivity, where busyness is worn as a badge of honor. This idea of a mandatory pause, a time dedicated to simply being, not doing, it almost feels countercultural.
It is countercultural. And yet maybe the ancients were onto something. We see the consequences of our relentless pursuit of more all around us. Burnout is rampant. Stress levels are through the roof. Perhaps we can learn something from this ancient practice of carving out time for rest and rejuvenation.
I think you're right. So we're seeing some pretty profound themes emerge here. Creation as a deliberate and purposeful process. Humans created with inherent value and purpose. And this radical idea of rest woven into the very fabric of existence.
It's amazing how these ideas, as old as they are, still have the power to challenge and inspire us today. They offer a different way of looking at the world, at our place in it, and at our relationship with each other.
I'm realizing that we've only just scratched the surface of Genesis chapter 1. There's so much more to uncover, so much more to explore.
Absolutely.
You ready to keep diving deeper?
Let's delve into some of the fascinating nuances and layers of meaning that we often miss on a first read.
As we're diving deeper into Genesis, it strikes me that even the order of creation has sparked some interesting interpretations.
That's right. Some scholars see it as reflecting an ancient understanding of the cosmos, a way of making sense of the universe as they knew it.
So paint a picture for us. How did ancient people envision the universe?
Imagine a three-tiered structure. You have the heavens above, where the sun, moon, and stars reside. Then you have the earth in the middle, the realm of land and sea. And finally, you have the waters below, a sort of underworld or abyss.
Okay, I'm picturing it, this three-layered universe. But how does this tie back to the creation story in Genesis?
Well, think about the order of creation. First, you have the separation of light and darkness, bringing order to the heavens. Then the separation of waters above and below, creating the sky and the seas. Next, dry land emerges, followed by plants. Then the sun, moon, and stars to govern the day and night.
Wait a minute. It's like Genesis is describing the formation of this ancient cosmological model step by step.
Exactly. And then you have the creation of sea creatures and birds inhabiting the waters above and the sky. Finally, land, animals, and humans are created to inhabit the dry land. It's like each element is placed in its proper domain within this three-tiered universe.
You're blowing my mind right now. It's not just a random list of creations. It's a reflection of how people understood the very structure of the universe.
And it highlights the interconnectedness of everything. Each element has its place, its purpose, and they all work together in this beautifully ordered cosmos. It really makes you appreciate the ingenuity and creativity of the ancient mind.
Really does. And it makes you think, how does our understanding of the cosmos today differ from this ancient view? How has our perspective on our place in the universe evolved?
Those are great questions to ponder. And it leads us back to this concept of being made in God's image, which we touched on earlier. It's such a powerful idea. But what does it actually mean for how we live our lives?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? If we truly believe that every human being carries this spark of the divine, it seems like it should radically change everything.
It should, and it does.
Right.
At least in theory, for starters, it demands a radical sense of respect and compassion for every person, regardless of their background, beliefs, or circumstances.
Right, because it's hard to justify prejudice or discrimination when you see every person as inherently valuable, as reflecting something sacred.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It also challenges us to think about our responsibility to one another. If we're all connected in this profound way, then caring for others isn't just a nice thing to do, it's an imperative.
And that care extends beyond just our fellow humans, right? I mean, we're given dominion over creation in Genesis, but that doesn't sound like a license to exploit it.
Absolutely not. If we're made in the image of the Creator, then we have a responsibility to care for creation, to be stewards of this planet we share. This idea of dominion should be understood as responsible stewardship, not domination.
It's like the whole story is calling us to live in a more harmonious, just, and sustainable way. Those ancient words are speaking directly to our modern challenges.
And that's the power of these foundational texts. They may have been written centuries ago, but their wisdom and insights are timeless. They speak to the core of what it means to be human, to live in community, and to find our place in the world.
I feel like we're just beginning to scratch the surface of the deeper implications of this text. There's so much more to unpack, so many layers to explore.
You're absolutely right. And as we continue our deep dive into Genesis chapter 1, I think you'll be amazed by the richness and complexity of this ancient text and how much it still has to teach us today.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Genesis chapter 1. We've covered so much ground. The 6 days of creation, the idea of being made in God's image.
All that structure and symbolism and those profound implications for humanity and our place in the world.
It's amazing to think how this ancient story, this foundational myth, it's still shaping our world today, even if we don't realize it.
Yeah, that's so true. These ideas, these archetypes, they've seeped into our collective consciousness. You see them everywhere, influencing art, literature, politics, even social movement.
Give us some examples. Where do we see these echoes of Genesis today?
Well, think about the modern environmental movement, the idea that we have this responsibility to care for creation, to be stewards of the earth, that's deeply rooted in Genesis.
Right? Not just preserving resources for ourselves, but recognizing the intrinsic value of nature, the interconnectedness of everything. That's definitely a very Genesis-inspired perspective.
Absolutely. And you see it in human rights, too. The idea that every person has inherent dignity and worth, that comes directly from the concept of being made in the image of God.
Wow. It's amazing how these ancient ideas still resonate centuries later, fueling those movements for justice and equality.
And even on a personal level, in the realm of self-improvement and spirituality, we see the idea of the Sabbath popping up, taking time for rest and reflection. It's become so relevant in our world today, our fast-paced, hyper-connected world.
It's like we're rediscovering that ancient wisdom.
Right.
Recognizing that maybe they were onto something. Insights into human nature and the human condition that we've kind of lost sight of.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of these timeless texts. They hold up a mirror for us to reflect on our own lives, our values, our priorities.
I'm feeling this sense of awe at the power of story, the enduring legacy of these ancient ideas.
I agree. And hopefully a sense of responsibility, too. If this is the story of our beginnings, our place in the world, what does it mean for how we live today?
Exactly. How do we honor the dignity of every human being? How do we care for this planet? We've been entrusted with it. How do we create a world that reflects the harmony and goodness that Genesis describes?
Those are the big questions. But I think our deep dive today has given us some tools, some frameworks, some inspiration to start seeking those answers.
You're right. Maybe that's the ultimate message of Genesis. It's not just a story about the past, but an invitation to create a better future.
Beautifully put. And on that note,
Mm.
leave you to ponder these questions, to explore these ideas further. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Genesis chapter 1.